This next piece is a green caterpillar and a butterfly. Lively children.
Thank you, Melanie. Good morning and welcome to Bellingham Unitarian Fellowship. I'm Reverend Paul Beckel. We begin today by acknowledging that the land in which we stand is the land of the native peoples of the Lummi and Nooksack nations. We respect these people by respecting their land, by respecting all of the land which connects us to them, our past to our present, and our present to our future. Thank you for being here today. Let's begin with lighting the chalice. No, we'll begin with some announcements from Laura Lee.
Good morning, and thank you for zooming in, BUF audience. The game is afoot. Don't put our budget in jeopardy. We've got a $10,000 pyramid to climb to fulfill this year's fundraiser goal. We're holding an online auction May 9th through 23rd. That's right. Mark your calendars now, and when the price is right, you too can bid on super cool stuff and services donated by you and your favorite merchants. Let's start to spin that wheel of fortune by emailing at least 2 of your favorite merchants to ask for a donation and to look around your house for some treasures to donate. How about offering your very own talents and services to help out your fellow congregants? Perhaps you even have someone to auction off in the dating game. What might auction offerings look like in a time of social distancing? Homemade desserts, soups and meals, handcrafted items. Oh, you crafty quilters and knitters out there. Works of art made by you or artists in our community. Lessons and classes that can be offered online. The auction team can help you plan a successful event. Small outdoor gatherings where attendees can be safely spaced apart. Outdoor excursions with a limited number of attendees. Virtual online social events, musical performances, games, share a topic of interest, book discussion, etc. Offer of the use of your vacation home. Gently used treasures a la Antique Roadshow. With your help, this year's auction will raise the funds needed to support the good work of the fellowship and continue to build a beloved community that will sustain us throughout the coming months. What's my line? Well, I'm Laura Lee Carboni, your auction promoter. Who else is in those Hollywood squares ready to help with this fundraiser? Up there in the corner box is Henry Ohana. In the center box is Debbie Boots. Down in the lower right is Pam Ives. We are ready to help you with ideas and to input your items and services into our Together auction website. So let's make a deal. Now for more announcements. Today from 1 to 3, join in the Love and Light Fest, celebrating the equinox and the lengthening of our days. We'll have songs, love songs, performed by members of the choir outside in front of BUF, as well as an open mic. Bubbles of love for you to drive through, modeling clay and votives for you to make your very own chalice at home, as well as some bulbs to plant. Fair trade will be there for stocking up on coffee, tea, and chocolates. Don't miss these and other events. Go to buf.org to sign up for the midweek update to stay connected to our beloved community.
Good morning. I'm Noreen Fujita-Sacco, and I identify as she and her. Yesterday at 2:37 a.m. was our spring equinox, one of 2 times in the year when the sun is directly above the equator with an equal balance of day and night. The equinox reminds me to balance many things, perhaps not within this one day, but over the course of the year or my life. As I consider balancing the intersections of my life, I recall that I've most often felt like the outsider, wondering where I belong. Growing up, I was too German to be American. I was too American to be German. And even now, I feel too European to be an American, often. And I feel hardly Japanese at all, even though I look more Japanese than otherwise. Now I've come to think of my many backgrounds as a Venn diagram. The sets are my Prussian-German motherland, Japanese fatherland, Italian culture through marriage, and my chosen heritage in America. The union is me, as we so often tell our youth, unique and unrepeatable inside our community, here where I belong. Today, I light my chalice to honor a quest for equilibrium. And now I invite you to join me in reciting our covenant. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service gives it life. Celebrating our diversity and joined by a quest for truth, we work for peace and honor all creation. This is our covenant.
Now let's join together in hymn number 163, For the Earth Forever Turning.
If you have captions screaming on the bottom of your screen, you can either say hooray or you can turn them off. The way you do that is you have a CC icon at the bottom of your screen. You click on that and you have the option to either turn them off, make them bigger or smaller if you click on the settings, or you can get a full transcript and you'll be able to read it off to the right of your screen. Let's welcome in the spring now, but if it's not quite here yet, let's welcome in the equinox. It is good to have another reminder that as the world turns and our lives are profoundly affected by the forces of sun and moon, and our relative position to each of these. Gravity and the tides and the angle at which daylight hits us. The length of days which can so drastically alter our moods, our motivation, even our sense of purpose. These will be what they will be. And now, even though this cosmic geometry and motion is steady, now we reach another tipping point. Change is in the air. And even when we welcome it, change can be unsettling. It can put us off balance. And in an interdependent world, when one is off balance, all are off balance. So when I think of equinox, I do not imagine that it represents a state of perfection. Rather, it is a place to which to return regularly as our dynamic lives take a cue from the cosmos. Let's take a little time now to quiet ourselves. Be sure that we're breathing, whether we're standing or we're sitting, we're rooted to the earth, aware of our own presence and aware of our presence in relation to the cosmos and to each other. And I invite you to close your eyes as we join together now for a moment of centering and shared silence. In our minds now, let's form a circle and join hands. Perhaps you're sitting, perhaps you're standing. Either is fine. Envision a hand in each of your hands. And now envision all of us together in a large circle. And keeping your eyes closed, please gently release those hands that you hold. And slowly drop your hands to your sides. Now please place your left hand over your heart. Let this hand symbolize that in you which is wounded, that which cries out to be healed. Let this hand symbolize your shortcomings, those aspects of your personality most in need of transformation. Let it represent that in your life about which you feel shame. Let it symbolize those aspects of yourself that you'd like to disown. And let's take a moment to be with this woundedness, this failing or shortcoming, shame, disowning. And now let's let that hand drop away from your heart and place it at our sides. Now let's place our right hand over our hearts. And let this hand symbolize that in you which possesses healing power, a power which cries out to be utilized. Let it symbolize your strengths, the aspects of your personality most seeking expression. Let it symbolize the life experience and journey now available to others as a resource. Let it symbolize the creative energy that you seek so passionately to share, energy that you wish to make as a humble offering to the universe. And now slowly drop your right hand away from your heart and place it at your side. And now let's rejoin hands with our neighbors. Feel their hands in ours on either side. And once again, bring your attention to your left hand. Recall your woundedness, your shortcomings, your self-delusions. And notice that these aspects of yourself are now being held in the gentle embrace of another's healing power and presence, in the gentle embrace of another's strengths and gifts, the gentle embrace of another's wisdom garnered in their life's journey. All of these are offerings of that person to you, along with the offerings of the universe. And all of these resources will be available to you long after our meditation is over. Now, while you continue to hold on your left and your right, shift your attention to the right and recall your own power to heal, your strengths and gifts seeking expression, the wisdom garnered from your life's journey, and creative energy seeking release. Notice that these aspects of you are now gently embracing another's woundedness, gently embracing their shortcomings, gently embracing their shame and their self-delusions. And now, with hands still held and eyes still closed, take a moment to imagine how we appear together, hand in hand, each of us embraced with all of our wounds and imperfections in the gentle care of this whole community. Let's be aware again of our connections with each other. Bring your attention to your left hand and gently squeeze the hand that it holds. Bring your attention to your right hand and gently squeeze the hand it holds. In our connections with one another, we have available the experience of grace, something larger than ourselves, an expression of what it means to be whole now, even as our lives are still unfolding. So now may the lives that we choose live up to the promises that they hold. Blessed be. And in the spirit of that goodwill, generosity, and wanting to hold one another gently, I invite you to write into the chat any short phrases representing what's going on in your hearts, what's pulling you away from this moment perhaps, or what you want to celebrate with our congregation. Keep your eyes closed if you wish, and I will just read what you write in the chat so you can just hold one another again with your eyes closed. Housing security. holding my mother and hoping she finds peace. Thank you to the Widening the Circle class this morning. Gratitude for the warm embrace of beloved community and concern for my brother Jim. And another Jim, my father Jim, is in the hospital again, holding all my family in love. Happy Nowruz, Persian New Year. Leslie organized 40 plus years of knitting patterns. Ernie Hines in ICU. Our love to Ernie. 'Tis a gift to be simple. Nee Baumstein's 94th birthday. Hope and help and healing. Thank you to my medical team and friends. Holding our daughter who battles Lyme's and is therefore fearful of the virus inoculations. Joy in beginning the co-creative adventures in the garden. And as our thoughts continue to go out to one another, let's continue to receive them, knowing that there is both joy and sorrow in our midst, and also strength and love to hold them all.
Good morning. I'm Mike Betts. I've been a member here at BUF for seems like a long time, and I recently got sent something which I found interesting. Decades before Thoreau moved to Walden, more than a dozen formerly enslaved Black residents of Concord made Walden Woods their home. With its infertile soil, Walden Woods wasn't considered valuable land and thus became a place for the town's outcasts to live more freely. Thoreau felt a certain kinship with this community living on the fringes of society. He devoted nearly a half a chapter in Walden titled Former Inhabitants to telling their stories. Born around 1744, Brister Freeman was one of the first known inhabitants of Walden Woods and the second Black man to own property in Concord. Freeman fought as a soldier in the American Revolution. He spent the first 30 years of his life in Concord, enslaved by the prominent John Cumming, a doctor in Concord. He went to war on 3 separate tours while still legally designated as property. On his final tour in 1779, he self-emancipated by declaring his last name as Freeman on his military papers. This was an incredibly risky move, as enslaved soldiers took the last name of their owners as a means of protection. The assumption was that there was a white person who would come to the aid as a way to protect what they viewed as their property. Unable to prove this new freedom outside of Concord and barred from assimilating into the city itself, Freeman pooled his resources with one of his comrades, Charleston Eddes, and bought a 1-acre tract of land in Walden Woods. He built a home for his 3 children and wife, Fenda. With farming and survival skills accrued from time on Cummings' land, the Freeman family grew what they could in the sandy soil, fished, and gathered other foods in the woods. Around the time Massachusetts abolished slavery in 1783, the community of Black Concord residents living freely in Walden Woods grew. Freeman's sister, Zilpah White, moved into a 1-room house at the edge of what would later be Thoreau's bean field. She continued to live in the woods into her 80s. Ultimately, few could survive on the lands in Walden Woods. Freeman's wife and his friend Eddes died of diseases related to malnutrition. Freeman is thought to have died in 1822. Over time, the other Black residents in their community left for cities with more opportunities. Many houses in Concord were stops on the Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Lewis Hayden, William Lloyd Garrison, and John Brown all visited and spoke there. When Thoreau arrived in 1845, all the Black residents had moved on. He was intentional about building his cabin within these original homesteads. As he began piecing together the stories of the inhabitants who'd come before him, he was very much inserting himself into that community. Thoreau was staunchly and vocally opposed to slavery. He made it clear that he had admiration for not only their independence, but their ability to withstand a constant and onslaught of racist harassment. And there we are. The end.
To balance my cultural diversity, I rotate between birthrights, first reading about one and then another. And lately I've noticed how frequently these merge together. Long ago, I learned the Japanese concept of Niwa Sono. Niwa is one of the earliest terms used for a garden, dating as early as 10,000 BCE, when it referred to the territory where nomadic hunter-gatherers ranged for food. Niwa is a space of feral nature, open and wild but known. Sono was used starting around 300 BCE to designate gardens created for agricultural purposes that were somehow bordered, either naturally or man-made borders. Sono infers a place where humans practice some control over nature. A guiding principle of Japanese gardening is the harmonious balance between the rugged natural beauty and human creation, Niwa Sono. Japan's spring celebration is the Cherry Blossom Festival, observed in tended city parks and wild landscapes. Sakura, cherry blossoms represent the fleetingness of life as they last only a short period of time. For those brief 2 weeks, however, they put on a magnificent display of beauty. The Japanese Sakura campaign initially brought 9,000 cherry trees to Berlin and Brandenburg in an expression of interest in German reunification and friendship between Japan and Germany beginning in 1990. The cherry tree program continued to other German cities and other countries where the Spring Festival is celebrated today under many names. Whatcom County has its own Hanadori Trail of cherry trees in Ferndale. Japan's Sakura Matsuri, Germany's Kirschblütenfest, and Ferndale's Cherry Blossom Festival are part of my intersection. More recently, I read Man's Search for Meaning, written by Dr. Viktor Frankl in 1946 after his release from the German concentration camps. One of the passages that struck me reads, "Freedom, however, is not the last word. Freedom is only part of the story and half of the truth. Freedom is but the negative aspect of the whole phenomenon, whose positive aspect is responsibility. In fact, freedom is in danger of degenerating into mere arbitrariness unless it is lived in terms of responsibleness." Again, freedom is in danger of degenerating into mere arbitrariness unless it is lived in terms of responsibleness. Viktor Frankl said, "That is why I recommend that the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast be supplemented by a Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast." A friend of Viktor Frankl, the American educator and author, Dr. Stephen Covey, shared this dream. Dr. Covey chose Gary Lee Price to create a 300-foot Statue of Responsibility, which will be situated on a campus that is scheduled to open, was scheduled to open in 2023. It's likely later now due to the pandemic. Viktor Frankl also wrote, "To the European, it is a characteristic of the American culture that again and again one is commanded and ordered to be happy. But happiness cannot be pursued, it must ensue. One must have a reason to be happy. Once the reason is found, however, one becomes happy automatically. As we see, a human being is not one in pursuit of happiness, but rather in search of a reason to become happy." And finally, I wrote something in my journal that I didn't mark properly, so I don't know if the citation is from Dr. Frankl or a conclusion I came to. I wrote, "Suffering and unhappiness are not bad and to be avoided at all costs, as modern advertising would have us believe. We must learn to understand why we suffer, what good comes from it, and recognize the honor of our suffering. You might consider Gandhi, the suffragists, the civil rights marchers, or something more personal to you. I believe it is important to our mental health to truly understand not only what good comes from our suffering, but also to recognize what makes us happy. Happy as in content with ourselves, rather than happy because we're enjoying the brief pleasure of a treat. As an example, I spent years working 2 jobs, unable to afford basic modern conveniences like a hairdryer, let alone a washer and dryer. I chose to use money to send my son to private school and on school trips, and so he might attend extracurricular activities instead of pursuing my own education or having us travel more frequently together. My suffering bore the fruit that I provided an excellent education for my son. He has a career he loves and the education to achieve success in that career. My sacrifice was willing and conscious and still makes me happy. Having filled my responsibility, now I have, I think, extraordinary pleasure in the freedom to pursue my own interests." Someone asked on a website, how do German students learn about the Holocaust? Rebecca Kastner outlined her various experiences from elementary school through high school in Germany and concluded, "Of course, it would be nice to have ancestors I could simply be proud of, but in the end, who can? Every country has dark spots in histories. Ours just happen to be huge and pretty recent. And this sounds like it might apply to the modern United States, as well as Germany, Japan, or Italy. Frankl said, since Auschwitz, we know what man is capable of, and since Hiroshima, we know what is at stake. And I might add that since the pandemic, or since the Capitol attack, we know how frail our freedom and happiness are, and how strongly we should protect them and take on that responsibility. So finally, let me temper all of this responsibility and deep thinking with two more phrases from my cultures. From Italy, dolce far niente is translated as the sweetness of doing nothing. And an American saying is everything in moderation, even moderation. So let us find happiness by balancing freedom with responsibility and responsibility with regular recess. You saw in a slide a moment ago, Luciano Pavarotti in a hammock somewhere in Italy, enjoying the sweetness of doing nothing. Let us take breaks to celebrate the brief beauty of cherry blossoms in life. Let us rest so that we might have energy to take up our quest for equilibrium again. Intersections are where I find my balance, rarely held for long, but woven throughout my wild and tamed heart and the many cultures that make up my life.
Thank you, Noreen. Books number 177. We'll sing the verses in English first, and then we'll sing it in Japanese. Sakura, sakura, yayoi no sora. Oh, sorry. I said we were going to sing it in English first. My bad. Sumimasen. We start eigo. Cherry blooms, cherry blooms, cherry blooms are everywhere, like a cloud from out the sky. Mists of blossoms fill the air, cherries, cherries blossoming. Come and see, come and see. Let all now see and sing. Cherry blooms, all the world their beauty sees. Yoshino is cherry land, Tatsuta for maple trees, Karasaki for the pine. Let us go, where pine trees greenly shine. もう一度日本語です。桜、桜、弥生の空は見渡す限り、霞か雲か匂いづいずる。いざやいざや見に行かん。
In Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu said, using Tao is like pulling on a bowstring. The top bends down, the bottom bends up, and all the energy is focused in the middle. Tao takes energy from where it is and sends it where it needs to be. The simplified, child's version of this verse is easier to remember. If you pull the bowstring back too far, you'll wish you hadn't. Is there any chance that in some aspect of your life, you're pulling the string back too far? The total absence of tension is not desirable. A bow with no tension at all is useless, whether it be an archery bow or the bow of a fiddle, or a string on that same fiddle. Every one of the strings on the fiddle is in its own suitable state of tension. And then one of the strings is set to vibrating and the others respond immediately. Picture then the tension of the bow moving across the tension of the strings, making lively music or soothing music. The bow in contact with one or more strings. Well, not just stationary contact, but agitating, rubbing one or two strings and each of the others responding. And even when none of these components is still, when all of them are vibrating intensely, there is the potential for a form of balance called harmony. A balance so sweet that to the human ear, it sounds like stillness. The total absence of tension is not desirable. An archery bow without tension cannot shoot, can't even hold the arrow in place. Even when at rest, the bow and the string are held taut, holding tremendous potential energy. The inanimate bow or inanimate strings, they're affected by temperature and moisture and entropy, so they might be in some flux between too much and too little and just right. And those are just inanimate objects, but our lives make all of that much more complicated and multidimensional. Life in pandemic has been a distressing mix of too little and too much and never at the right time, never in the right place or with the right people. And some of us with too little are getting too little over and over and over, day after day. And some who are getting too much one day are not finding relief the next day. And our potential energy is thwarted. And we can become forgetful, short-tempered, breathless, and accident-prone. It feels a little like walking a tightrope, except that it's not tight. It goes slack, and then all of a sudden tight again. And we've all lived long enough to have gotten pretty good at anticipating and adjusting to this flux on and off. But now, for many of us, the changes occur when we least expect them. And maybe there's someone else walking a rope right next to us and they get off balance. So then what? Especially if we have not had time to think in advance what we might do for one another. I love the imagery that Noreen shared with us, the harmonious balance between rugged natural beauty and human creation. And sakura, cherry blossoms representing the fleetingness of life, magnificent while they can be. I love walking around these neighborhoods at this time of year, colors popping out one day and then gone the next, and then different colors, shapes, and sizes the day after that. One of the biggest kicks for me these last few weeks has been the baby goats in a neighbor's yard, just a few blocks from BUF, and a big friendly yellow lab who looks after them. It started out with just one kid kicking up his feet, and then he disappeared. And I expressed my disappointment, and the neighbor said, yeah, he went back home to the farm. He was just here for a while because he and his mom didn't bond. That was a few weeks ago. And then just this past Friday, there were two kids, one even smaller than the first one, kicking up its heels, and another that was still young, but about 3 times as big. Could it have been the same baby from 3 weeks ago? It's hard to tell. It might have been. How swiftly flow the years and the stages of our lives. Another thing I appreciate your bringing up, Noreen, is the statue of responsibility. It will be wonderful if that gets built. According to the website that you pointed us to, Covey, the author of Seven Habits of Highly Affected People, who lived about 15 years longer than Frankl, promised that he would keep pursuing the project and provide substantial funding. But whether the monument gets built in our lifetimes or not, I appreciate the vision. In fact, I appreciate the vision even more for its implication that there are things important to do today, even if they do not pay off until after we are gone. What especially strikes me about this juxtaposition of freedom and responsibility, and this is my reading of the Changing American Mindset anyway. 50 years ago, when Frankl proposed a statue, the word responsibility seemed primarily associated with conservative values and freedom with liberal values. And now, has it flipped? I've spoken before about how I see liberal and conservative values intersecting and overlapping, though sometimes with different connotations. But in this case, freedom and responsibility seem to have passed one another like two ships in the night. 30 years ago, when I first encountered Unitarian Universalism, I was thrilled to find a religious tradition that explicitly referred to itself as liberal and celebrated religious freedom. But somehow along the way, the exercise of religious freedom has come to mean that one can do whatever we want, regardless of how it affects others, if we claim that we are acting on so-called religious values. And freedom, more broadly, I fear, has come to be understood as freedom from consequences. 200 years ago, 250 years ago, in its earliest days, Unitarianism was associated with the religious freedom of Thomas Jefferson, which he spoke of as a wall between church and state, and the freedom of Emerson, which he spoke of as self-reliance. Unitarian Universalism still embraces those ideals, but our focus has shifted. Our understanding of ourselves and our relationships with each other and our relationship with the earth has shifted from independence to interdependence. And our priorities have shifted from unfettered individual freedom and responsibility only for ourselves toward responsibility for the larger self of which we are a part. It's the notion that none of us are free until all of us are free. Regrettably, there is another website with another version of a statue of responsibility, asking for money, of course, to get it built. And there's just enough suspicious elements on this site that I hope people will recognize it as a scam. But this is a free country, I've heard, where we should be free to deceive and take advantage of each other. No, the statue of responsibility, the website, the real one, there are two. The one that seems to be the real one uses this phrase: social, civil, and vocational responsibility. Social, civil, and vocational responsibility. I think this ties it all together well. The word vocation is derived from the root word meaning the call. A call perhaps from something larger than our individual selves. A call to give our lives to be a part of the web of all creation. A continuation of the verse from Tao Te Ching that I shared a few minutes ago continues. Tao takes energy from where it is and sends it where it needs to be. But most people take from those who don't have enough, so those who have too much already can have more. So who in this world is truly generous to others? This is still Tao Te Ching. Who in the world is truly generous to others? People who are in touch with the Tao. They do their work without taking credit. They get the job done and move on. And so it is with us and the sun and the moon and the stars. Amen.
Thinking back to the meditation that we did earlier and thinking back to that statue of responsibility, in both images you have two hands. I would like to take that another step further and give you an image to consider. When we reach out to hold one another's hands, we reach out usually symmetrically. That is, hands are both up, facing forward, facing backwards, or facing down. We often think of the hand that is facing up as something that wants to receive, and maybe the hand that is facing down as something that is giving. In a circle, I learned to hold my hands asymmetrically so that I could imagine one hand giving and another receiving. And it helps me remember that in the circle, we want to be in balance. So as we take our offering today, I invite you to remember the many gifts you have received and the many gifts that you have given in our fellowship. In a moment, you'll see on screen ways in which you may give, either using our website or by mailing in checks or other means. And I invite you to give generously as you are willing and able.
The offertory today is from a set of pieces called Japanese Festival, which celebrates music as the language of the world. And it was written less than 10 years after the end of World War II by a Japanese composer. The piece is A Story in My Dream.
Thank you, Melanie. Before we sing our final hymn, I want to invite you all to come this afternoon to our spring festival, our love songs and bubbles and chalice making clay festival. You can buy chocolate and tea and you can hear people sing, and it's open mic. So come and sing Row Row Your Boat or I Love the Mountains or something. I'll have some songbooks you can grab if you don't know what to sing. You don't have to be prepared. I don't have to know. We'll have microphones on the street underneath big patio umbrellas, so you're socially distanced from me or the next singer. And it should just be a fun time. How often have we got together in the last year as a community safely and for fun like this? So anytime between 1 and 3 o'clock, come along and join us for our Love Fest Take 2. And now we'll finish. Our final hymn is 1064 in the Teal hymn book, Blue Boat Home, one of BUF's favorite hymns of all time. Though below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. Waiting, this is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
It feels so good to be able to sing that song full-throated with you. And I can just imagine our doing so together in this room. So now, actually before we go, I hope you'll stay for the breakout rooms right after the postlude. We'll be broken into groups of about 8 people for about 10 minutes at a time, and then we'll be re-randomized. And it's a great way to establish our trust among one another, knowing who we are and knowing of one another's aspirations and realities. So please stay. For now, I will extinguish the chalice, remembering that we are transient and that in our transience, we have the opportunity to be free and responsible and bonded in love. Melanie?
Are we doing our closing song?
Oh, my
Supposed-
mistake. Circle round. Let's go ahead and
Okay. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole.
The Happy Farmer.